When discussing about Volume 4 of DanMachi, the side story, I feel like this ends on a really nice note when it comes to Season 1, and I think it definitely has some interesting things that are also missing from the actual anime itself that probably should have been in the anime, which could have led people onto sort of a little bit of a teaser, but not too much of a teaser. Because I think, again, there was enough teasers at the end of the anime itself to kind of keep you interested, but there were definitely, I would say, some really interesting little teasers at the end of this particular volume that really get you quite intrigued to where the story is going to go. And that particularly comes down to the fact of, at the end of volume 4, Loki and the other actual gods themselves end up having a sort of meeting with Hermes. I love Hermes so much. He's just such a fun character, and I mentioned that in the main story as well. But they end up having a discussion about the reasons why the events are happening in the actual tower itself, of course deep down in the dungeon, and they discuss about the possibility of another sort of entrance slash exit, and that they'll obviously need to go looking for it because of the events that have transpired, the reason for like the monsters trying to get out of the dungeon. Of course they've always been trying to get out, but there's obviously, you know, something transpiring. How are they getting out? Where are they coming from? How deep? All the different things that are kind of leading into this. And that is where they come to the conclusion that there is obviously another entrance slash exit. But I think putting that aside, I think what was really interesting was, of course, the interactions between Eyes and Belle, the training arc that goes on. You can really see that Belle listens and sort of absorbs everything that Eyes says. And Eyes, I would say, is not the best teacher. She's more of a kind of a practical person, just trying to teach Belle hands-on rather than explaining little things, but she definitely explains little tricks and hints that really help Belle quite a lot. And you definitely see that in the anime itself, not just for the side story, but also for the actual main story itself, because the training arc, of course, happens in the main story as well, but you kind of see it a little bit more from her perspective. Of course, the elf girl that we all kind of know and love, I just don't really find her as interesting, and I find her very forced in the actual light novel itself. More so forced in the anime, as I've mentioned. I feel like it would have been a lot better if they went with how the light novel portrayed her, rather than how the anime tries to overly push her and add her into scenes that she isn't actually in. But still, nonetheless, I've been told by some fans that she becomes less prevalent as the actual volumes go on, particularly after this volume. She becomes a lot more less prevalent in the actual story itself, which makes me really happy because I like the focus of it being about, of course, Eyes, Loki, and of course the two twins being the Amazon girls. And I do really enjoy seeing, of course, the sort of trio when it comes to the dwarf, the elf, and of course the little short stock. That I really love the sort of interactions that go on between those three in particular, because they definitely seem to have some interesting chemistry. They seem to have a lot of, I would say, less than stellar history. But as that time has gone on, they've made amends, they've worked together, they've become closer and closer and closer, and they've built a common goal and a common sort of ambition to become stronger and better and to work as a team, knowing that as they work as a team, that allows them to become a much more functioning, stronger party as a whole. And you can really see that as a giant sort of guild, they really do work quite well. Even all the other sort of lower familiars, they all really look up and aspire to be like the other sort of top tier familiars slash adventurers themselves. And I really love that little interaction. I really love seeing that perspective of a much more larger sort of group of familiars working together, while when you look at the main story itself, it's a lot more smaller. You get Belle and his little group of ragtag team and them going on their little fun adventure. So I really love the differences that go on between, of course, the main story and the side story itself. And of course, the training arc doesn't just happen for Belle, it also happens for the elf girl. And I do like some of those little training parts because it kind of adds a bit of chemistry between not just the main elf girl that's with Loki, but also the other one that was introduced in the previous volume that has a definitely a interesting but darker history when it comes to some of the things that have transpired in the dungeon. I really like her because she's a character that's developed over the period of 2 volumes, and you definitely get to see a bit of a backstory. I would say the only downside about her is just, I would say, Bet's response to a lot of the stuff that goes on. Bet's always been a character that I find interesting but kind of really annoying. I love to hate him for a lot of the reasons that he grinds. He definitely is very narcissistic. He gets a little bit toey at the weirdest and the dumbest of things. He mentions about how he doesn't like people picking on weak people, but then he picks on weak people, he belittles them, he mocks them, and he tries to put himself on a pedestal that's above everyone else and tries to look down on everyone. I find him a bit of an oddball, but I do see kind of the interesting appeal. Otherwise, if you like everyone too much, they become too bland and boring. I find that Bet allows the other characters to shine a lot more, particularly, of course, the Amazon girls, because of the interactions that go on between Bet and the Amazon girls. But overall, I just really love the training arc itself, mainly, of course, for Eyes and Belle itself. The one thing I did notice was that in the anime for the main story, it doesn't show the alleyway fight. In the light novels for the main story, it does, and in this side story for the light novel, it does as well as the anime. Because in the anime itself, it shows this scene where after Belle and Eyes have their bit of a training, they end up bumping into Hestia. Hestia ends up following them, and they go down a very dark back alleyway, and they end up getting ambushed by Feya's familiars, where they end up testing, of course, Belle's strength, just testing how strong he is, what he's capable of, and then, of course, giving a very stern warning to Eyes. In the sort of side story, it more puts it, of course, in Eyes' perspective of how the Feya familiars are trying to sort of warn her, but in the actual main story itself, it kind of shows that they're testing Belle as well as warning her. But in the actual anime itself, for the side story, it's in there, but in the main story anime, it's not. And I think that's good that it's actually in the anime for the side story, because it kind of fills in some of the missing gaps that were in the main story itself. So I'm really glad they did add that. I think really the only things that were missing was just the ending stuff, and of course some of the world building, of course, when it comes to do with particular main characters that have a key influence on Belle's life. They definitely sort of remove some of that stuff out of this. Of course, some of the individuals that Belle is related to, as I've mentioned in other videos, that's not in there. At least they add the bulk of the main world building stuff, just not the ending stuff. I wonder if they ever did a season 2, would they have that meeting to kind of lead things in? We'll never know, we'll just have to wait and see. But overall, love this volume, I love the direction it goes, and of course it has the big fight scene between, of course, Belle and the Minotaur, but that is, of course, the main focus in the actual main story itself as well. That is just a sort of a minor polish area that they show a small different perspective, but a very minimal one. Of course, Feya's lovely familiar that blocks away is definitely a interesting highlight as well, in the interactions between that. But overall, love to know your thoughts in the comment section down below. But if you like this video, hit the like button, subscribe for more anime content, and I'll see you, beautiful nerds, in the next video.